Welcome to The Spotlight, the podcast where veterans and military spouses connect and share how their military experience has transformed their lives and their businesses. Here's your host, Bob Louthen.
Hey, this is your host, Bob Louthen, founder of the VeteranCrowd Network, the network that brings veterans and veteran-led businesses together with each other and the resources they need to prosper. And you are tuning into The Spotlight. Hey, everybody, welcome, man. This is your host, Bob Louthen. Welcome again to The Spotlight. I am pleased to have as my guest today another graduate of the United States Naval Academy. Today, we're going to be talking about that a little bit, but also talking about coffee, something that my heart would probably stop if I didn't have coffee every morning. Eric Johnson, the CEO of Trident. Welcome to the program.
Awesome. Bob, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to come on the program.
So here you are, Trident Coffee Roasters. You start a business. How in the heck does a veteran get into the coffee roasting business? How did this happen? Did you lose a bet? I'm just kidding.
Well, it's kind of funny. I think I had just gotten back from my third deployment, and I was figuring out what I wanted to do. And I was talking to my detailer, and I was like, "Hey, I would love to stay in San Diego. I'm born and raised here. I just bought a house in here, and I'd like to stay for a shore duty." And it wasn't in the cards. It's like I got Guam or Japan. I was like, "Okay," makes my decision simple. I think it's time to transition out. And it came into thing to be an entrepreneur when I went to the Service Academy Career Conference in 2015 here in San Diego. And lo and behold, I literally had a panic attack. I'm walking around, I'm in like a blazer and khakis, everyone's dressed up, suit and tie. And I just felt like that vibe was not something I wanted to go down that route. I knew I wanted to do business school. So my entrepreneurship spark just kind of came out of necessity because I didn't feel I had the need or want to work for anybody else. I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to kind of take my own fate into my own hands. And then it just came between doing that boost to business that transition offers to the old TAP program. And I really solidified what I wanted to do. I was cold brewing in my house at the time. And I was like, man, I can't believe no one's really doing this cold brew coffee thing. And from there, I had a couple of buddies test it. And that kind of was the start of what Trident has turned itself into. Was a little bit out of a panic attack and then just something I was passionate about.
I'm not a cold brew connoisseur. Talk about the process of cold brewing.
So being here in San Diego is we're like one of the meccas of craft beer, which is amazing to see. We've had amazing breweries here, and the traditional coffee you get up for the past 30 years is kind of the Starbucks model. You have a cafe, you do all espresso based, latte, milk drinks, things of that nature. And I was always a black coffee person, but always iced. I loved iced Americanos, but they didn't taste great. They were like jet fuel. I was like, hey, I'm just here for the caffeine. That's all I'm here for.
The military is not known for great coffee. All right.
No, we're not, we get a little secondhand stuff every now and again. So we take what we can get in most cards. Most time, the energy drinks too, Rippets, Red Bulls, Monsters. So we're caffeine junkies for sure. But my emphasis on health and wellness, I can't drink a Monster with 40 grams of sugar day in, day out and think that's going to be healthy for me. And so the cold brew process is great. You get a lot more flavor, a lot more of the caffeine, but a lot less the acidity. So from a health and wellness standpoint, cold brew is a fantastic pre-workout, but it's also just a better, healthier coffee beverage than what a lot of people are accustomed to when they go in and get a Starbucks drink that's, a Frappuccino. Even if it's sugar-free, you still have all the milk, all the dairy, all the sugar that's added in there. It ends up being like a 600-calorie smoothie, not a coffee. And so we wanted to come with a different approach from a health and wellness standpoint, and cold brew helped us do that.
Is it a different process?
Yeah, so we start everything kind of the same. We source our coffee, we find great quality, specialty grade, and then we roast it slightly differently than most traditional coffee roasters will roast an espresso-based beverage. And so we had to reformulate and kind of calibrate our senses to roasting for cold brew specifically. Gives it a little bit of a smoother profile. It's not as sharp and acidic. And then from there, we developed basically way we followed like how breweries do. We developed a water profile for every coffee, and then we basically let the coffee marinate in the cold water for 18 to 24 hours, depending on the coffee, and then extract, filter it out, and then we have our cold brew. So we've learned a lot from both sides, but we're this weird hybrid where we're kind of two different styles of company between coffee roasters and beer breweries that kind of blended very well together.
Very interesting. So this is a manufacturing process, unlike the Starbucks model where they're going to, make you cappuccino right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the equipment similar to what's in the craft brewing equipment? I mean, are you building buying all these big tanks and everything? Is it I'm
It's
curious what
almost
the place
the
looks like.
exact same setup. Yeah, it's very similar to what if you walked into a craft brewery, you see all the large fermenters and bright tanks and canning lines. We are able to get away with a little bit smaller setup just because we don't have to let the coffee ferment for 2 to 4 weeks like a beer needs to ferment, so to create alcohol. And so we have a faster turnaround time, but generally 90% of the equipment's the same. We have some specialized equipment that we utilize just because of what we do. But we modeled ourselves very much after kind of the craft beer scene and took those steps, took those processes, took that equipment and tweaked it a little bit to meet our needs. But yeah, we're almost very, very similar to the craft beer scene.
And so it's a batch process, not a continuous process. How long? How many flavors do you have?
So I've followed a few craft breweries here in San Diego, and I love the fact that you can walk in and, depending on who's there, there's a beer that hopefully will meet your style palate preference. So we have 15 cold brews on tap from all over the world, light, medium, dark roast. So as you walk in, most people have a emotional connection to a coffee. Like if you've ever been to Hawaii and you were sipping on Hawaiian coffee, you're like, this is the best coffee I've ever had. But a lot of it's just the place, the time, the people you're with. It creates a strong emotional connection. So if anyone has traveled the world to some of these places, if they see a Vietnamese coffee on tap, like, oh, I loved the coffee when I was in Vietnam. Let me get the Stoic Bond. And so it's really fun for us to kind of create these stories and create the symbology to connect people to the coffee. And it's a nice craft touch that we're trying to bring to the coffee space.
So a batch process, lots of different flavors, takes a day to make a batch. You got some inventory management issues here, probably. I mean, how long does it keep?
The best part. So we have some logistic challenges, like we're a cold chain, so we have to keep the product cold. So we have large walk-in coolers. We have a glycol system to keep the tanks cold and keep the coffee cold. But we run pretty lean. I think most people in the military, if they've ever done supply logistics, construction, they're used to running fairly lean. Normally we get kind of what we need, but you have to kind of stretch some stuff out. So we have several military members on our executive team, and we're doing a very good job of keeping our inventory down because we have a fast turnaround time that we're not sitting on stuff for months on end, and it's going through the turnovers very quick. So it makes our life from supply chain side a little smoother.
How are you distributing it now?
So we've just signed with a couple national distributors as well as some really solid local regional distributors. So we're primarily in Southern California, and we're working our way to some spots in Texas and then branching out to some national accounts here probably in the next 4 to 6 months. And so we utilize our distributors. We are in the process of developing great relationships with them. And from there, they are taking our product and then pushing it to retail stores like local independent grocery stores, some larger chain accounts, and then some local establishments like bars and restaurants that want our coffee on tap.
All right. And is it primarily, is it going to be bottled?
So we've done something slightly different. A lot of the packaging previously was done in glass bottles. We switched over to aluminum cans, similar to the craft beer industry. And we have a nitrogenation process that, in line with our canning line, will dose liquid nitrogen into the coffee. And it'll give you, if you shake it up, it'll give you that cascading nitro effect like a Guinness beer. And that's what we offer with all of our canned cold brew. And then we also have kegs that we distribute around for bars, restaurants, things of that nature to serve our coffee on nitro taps as well.
I gotta get my hands on some Trident coffee because And by the way, Dennis Volpe, I want to give a shout out to
Yeah,
Dennis. Dennis has been on the program. Small world. I was talking with him earlier this week. He says, "Oh, you need, Trident Coffee. I need to get you some." And I said, "Well, I'm talking to Eric on Friday."
perfect.
So we'll give a big shout out to him.
We'll get you a mixed bag out there of some roasted coffee as well as some cold brew, so you can get your hands on a little bit of everything.
Well, all right. So last kind of, novice question about cold brew. So I pop open a can of cold brew, right? I can drink it from the can cold or pour it over. What's the right way to do that?
The most craft way to do it would be to take the can, shake it a few times, and that kind of helps get the nitrogen activated again because it stays trapped inside the can. And then you just kind of crack the can open a little bit to release some of that backed up pressure. And you open it all the way, and you'll pour into just a pint glass, and you'll see that cascading nitro effect come out of.
Don't put it over
coffee.
ice, right? Serve it.
You can put it over ice, but it's best as long as it's nice and chilled coming out of the refrigerator. You just throw it right into a pint glass and sip on it. It's perfect.
All right.
No ice needed.
All right, so we're talking with Eric Johnson. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Trident Coffee Roasters. Hey, Eric, let's go back for a minute and talk about, your youth and, your indiscretion of joining the Navy, as opposed to going, well, the Space Force wasn't around at the time. So, but let's go back to your youth. How did you wind up choosing to go to the Naval Academy?
So going through high school, both of my grandparents, my grandfather was a chief in the Navy, is an air crewman, machinist mate on the old PBY Catalinas. My other grandfather on my mom's side was a Marine Corps colonel in the reserves. And so, but living in San Diego, it's very much a military town. You have tons of Navy, tons of Marine Corps. And so I was going through, but I knew I wanted to fly. That was like my goal growing up in high school. It's like, hey, I want to be a jet pilot. That's what I want to do. And so you obviously explore the Air Force, and then you explore the Navy a little bit. And one of my good friends I was growing up with, his dad went to the Naval Academy, and he's like, you understand there's more aircraft in the Navy than there are in the Air Force. He's like, you should look at the Naval Academy.
There's more boats
great.
in the Army than there is in the Navy.
We got some things backwards here, but
yeah.
And so lo and behold, I go after it for the next several years, from junior and senior year, apply to the Naval Academy, somehow, some way get in, very fortunate, very lucky. And that started my path at Annapolis, and worked hard. I was a mechanical engineer at the Naval Academy, got selected for pilot, went down to Pensacola, and then same week got nammy-whammied for my eyes. So I had to redesignate into a different community. And at the time in 2008, it was, hey, we have submarines. You can go civilian. We can just get you out of your contract. We're pretty overbooked right now. Or you can go into the CEC. And for anyone who goes to the academy, the CEC is not very prevalent. It's a very small portion can go direct. It's all either a trites or lat transfers or whatever. And so I found out about it. I was like, yeah, that sounds it's perfect background for me. I'm an engineer. I had my engineering training license at the time because I took that while I was at the academy,
right,
and got accepted into the Civil Engineer Corps, and did that for about 7 years before I got out.
I'm going to show my ignorance. Is that the Seabees, or is that
correct?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we have the officer side is the Civil Engineer Corps, and we do NAVFAC jobs, public work jobs, and then the expeditionary side through NECC is the Seabees. So the Seabee battalions are there, and so we rotate through, and we'll go to like a public works job, and then go to a Seabee battalion. And so ended up loving it. My first job was a NAVFAC job, which I did not care for. I'm not a desk job person. And then went to Seabee battalion and absolutely loved it. And then I ended up going to Afghanistan and then Iraq twice, once with the Army, then twice with special warfare. So had a great time, loved deploying, and loved not being behind the desk. So it was great.
Yeah, I gotta ask you a question now. Pensacola eye exam. You didn't go like to Floribama the night before the eye exam, did you?
No. For those who are familiar with that, like I was not a big drinker even afterwards. So I was always the DD. So, and my classmates will attest to the fact that I would happily drive them to get back from
From
Florida.
Floribama. Okay.
That was an excursion nonetheless. So Seville Quarter, McGuire's, whatever the case may be, I'd always happily be the DD.
There you go. That's all right. All right. Interesting stuff. Hey, you went to, I want to hear about this. USC has a Masters of Business for Veterans. What's that?
Yes. So it's a great program. They just finished their 8th cohort. And so I was in cohort 4 and loved it. It's a great transition because you do have a lot of exposure to leadership while in the military. But the hard part, I think, is that even with that exposure, you're not doing so much internal reflection on who you are as a leader. You're just saying, hey, be a leader. And so what I loved about this program, it dived into all the business stuff. So all the accounting, financing, stats, it gave a great broad brushstroke. So you became more comfortable on business acumen. But the leadership stuff that they teach there is actually more internal, like who you are as a person, who you are as a leader, which even for how great the military is of creating leaders, there's not that much time for internal reflection and introspection in terms of like, hey, what are these things that make me a leader? What are things that I can work on to be better? And so kind of by doing like, the Myers-Briggs and a lot of the kind of different personality testing, you can really kind of identify, hey, this is the type of person I am, and this is how the type of leadership style that best suits me. So you become more authentic. You're not trying to fake it till you make it, or the imposter syndrome, all those things that when, as a young officer, you kind of go in and you're like, well, I'm kind of in charge of 25 guys now. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so you just kind of roll with that for the first couple of years. But the program at USC is fantastic. Can't recommend it enough. And 3 of the guys I work with now at Trident are all MBV alumni.
How many people go through that program in a cohort?
They started small, I think around 50 to 70 for the first several years. And I think they've got it capped right around 90. And I know COVID was a little weird because it was all online for the past, 18 months. But I believe it's around 90 per cohort that they try to keep it to.
Do they commingle you in classes with other MBA students, or do they keep you in a separate path?
We have a slightly separate path. A lot of the instructors are at a Marshall School of Business. So they are the MBA teachers. They are the undergrad teachers as well. And so with that, there are some separations, but there are a lot of opportunity to go socialize and connect with the MBB students, with the undergrad students. So you become a part of Marshall, which is fantastic, but we just have our own kind of separate track.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here, and let's talk about the entrepreneurial journey. You started down this path 3 years ago, roughly.
So the ideation was in like 2015, because I was like, all right, I'm going to be getting out of the military. I got to figure out something. So the genesis of being an entrepreneur started back then, and we've been slowly but surely building the idea and concept. And so we officially opened our doors at Trident down in Imperial Beach in September 2017. And from there, we've been building and building and building from that one spot.
All right. So let's talk about the entrepreneurial path. Number one, do you think being a veteran was a help or a handicap? Were there things that, contributed to the successful launch? And were there some things that maybe were handicaps that you had to work through? I had to retool my thinking on that.
Definitely a lot of retooling coming from the military. It's just a different light that the business world runs in. It's not anything military-esque. There's profit and loss statements, there's money that needs to be accounted for. There's all these things that go to it. I think that kind of helped because I didn't know and was very eager to learn, and I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. But the biggest help, I think, is, not allowing yourself to fail. Like, you're going to fail multiple times, but you're not allowing yourself to give up. So that tenacity, that endurance, that resiliency that you learn in the military, because you go through such tough times, is probably the biggest that I've seen on any entrepreneur, regardless of military background or not. The ones that are resilient, the ones that have that extra grit, are the ones that survive and maintain. Because it's a roller coaster. I mean, it's a wild ride, especially for the first couple of years. I mean, literally within the same day, it's your best day of your life and it's the worst day of your life all in one, because like you just ride these waves. And so having that resiliency to weather the storm is huge.
So what, are you willing to share a story of like maybe the biggest mistake, something you could have done over, if you had a do over on one thing, what advice would you give?
I would say that you're not perfect. You're going to make plenty of mistakes down the entrepreneurship track. As long as you're sticking to your values and what you believe in, what you want to accomplish, you're going to bounce back, no problem. But there's days where it's like, all right, hey, I'm making payroll. I got all these expenses going out, and like, hey, I'm not, money's kind of not coming in as fast as you want it to. And so you get nervous, and it's almost kind of sometimes lonely because a lot of entrepreneurs just internalize stuff and don't want to share, and so you get kind of stuck on this island by yourself when you don't have to be. I just think that's kind of comes with the territory of, being at the ship's helm, is that it's so lonely up top sometimes. But the best thing that I've kind of learned from all those, mistakes is that, hey, just make small mistakes, make as many small mistakes as you can, keep falling forward, fail forward, and keep going. Because as long as you don't make anything crucial or, completely detrimental, don't think illegal, there's always ways to bounce back. There's always find a way to get to yes. And I think if you have that mindset, it makes life easier. It's still a tough, difficult challenge, but at the same time, knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel, you're going to break through. This is happening for a reason. You learn a lot. It's the best way to learn, is what I found, is just by going forward, making mistakes and learning from them, and learning quickly.
And now a word about a VeteranCrowd Spotlight sponsor. Cardomax is owned and operated by former Navy SEAL Sean Matson. Cardomax has designed just the right supplements for you and is offering VeteranCrowd an exclusive offer. Buy one, get one free on your first order. Go to cardomax.com and use promo code VeteranCrowd. That's cardomax.com, helping you achieve your max. Now back to your host, Bob Loudon.
Hey, we're talking with Eric Johnson. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Trident Coffee Roasters in San Diego. Eric, did you have some mentors during this process that helped you think through problems and stay the course?
I think a lot of stuff, it's my personality trait of going back to talk about how the USC thing kind of lets you know who you are a little bit more. I'm an introvert, and so it's one of those things that's hard for me to ask for help. I think some people have that. It's not necessarily a weakness, but it's one of those things. It's not. I don't know. It's difficult to ask for help because you don't want to be seen in a certain way, and that's something I'm definitely working on. But there was people all the time that would come out of the woodwork that when you least expected, that are willing to give you the helping hand, that and you just can't be afraid to ask for it. So we've had great business mentors. We've had great coffee mentors that we buy coffee from, we source coffee from, and then you learn along the way. And as long as you're not afraid to ask and you're adding value back in any way you can, it works out well. It's a beautiful ecosystem. It's just sometimes our pride and our ego gets in the way from us from actually going out and asking help to solve the problems that we're stuck on.
You mentioned the Myers-Briggs and you mentioned being introverted, so I am an ESTJ. All right. Are you willing to share which one? Are you an I something?
Yeah, I'm an INTJ. So
INTJ. Okay.
yeah, there's not very many of us. I think it's only like 2%. So we're kind of a small group. So
Okay.
love the visionary side of it. I think if the architect is the type that they have in the Myers-Briggs. So
It's surprising though how many introverts go in to become entrepreneurs. There's a whole lot of people that say, I'm introverted, but here I am, in this role.
oh yeah, I feel a lot of the times too is knowing where your strengths are, knowing where your strengths aren't. So we have a fantastic director of business development, Josh Maffey, who's a Air Force veteran, and he went through the MBA program with me and my cohort.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not like opposites, but he is such a friendly person, can talk up conversation with anybody. And so he's doing phenomenal work for us right now in the business development space. And it's adding people around you that complement your strengths, where you don't have to focus on your weaknesses. I'm not a big believer in you should work on your weaknesses. I think that's more or less not a waste of time. I think you should be aware of them, but you should focus on your strengths and then add people in to your space, to your world, that will complement those weaknesses, so there's no gaps in the armor. But to try to work on weaknesses and take away from what you're really good at, I don't see the benefit. I think just go with what you're good at, amplify that, make that exponential, and you'll add value to where other people can't.
You remind me of a quote from Russell Wilson, who's now the quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks. His grandmother used to tell him, because he grew up here in the Richmond area, his grandmother used to tell him, Russell, make sure that one of your strengths is that you know what your weaknesses are. And so that's really, really good advice. Hey, not to pry into this thing, but how big of an issue is capital formation for the entrepreneur? I have a military acronym called called DROOM, DROOM, which is don't run out of money, right? That's the curse to the entrepreneur. What's the capital challenge been in the coffee business?
So we went pretty heavy on equipment at first. And again, we were very new to the space, very green. Those are the things that we didn't know. We were starting a complete new category. Cold Brew in 2016, 2017 almost like didn't exist. There was a few companies. And so the institutional knowledge was non-existent. So we had to try to learn it on our own. And so that takes time, that takes money, that takes mistakes. So from the capital asset side and like building up your financing piece is something that I'm learning right now. I'm like pseudo acting CFO, but we found some great mentors in the financing space who will, shed a light on like, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Like, how are you structuring this? And so they provide great guidance and great insight on terms of like, hey, we're in a pretty capital intensive business, the manufacturing business, production business. We got to find ways to make sure that cash flow is coming in right where we need it to. And so it's been a challenge for sure. But there's a lot of great mentors out there who are really, really good with financing, really, really good with money. And so I've been trying to pick their brain as best I can in terms of how to continue to grow this and take it from this level to here, and keep growing it. Because you're always going to need fresh capital coming in to continue to grow so you don't plateau or stall out. So we've had great growth over the past 2 or 3 years. And so to keep that going, we've had capital coming in at different times to make sure we can sustain that.
What's sort of the longer term vision here for Trident now? What's the next year hold for you guys? What's the long-term vision?
So we want to create awareness around health and wellness. And for us, coffee is kind of a way that we can introduce it. So with our retail locations, we have 2 retail spots right now in San Diego. We complement our cold brew coffee with our MCTO, keto-based products, but we just started our keto bakery program that is making phenomenal keto donuts, keto muffins, keto bagels. And so where we can really educate people on stuff they love, because people love coffee and donuts. Like it's a great pairing. Like Dunkin' Donuts has done phenomenal because it's such a great complement. Like it goes hand in hand. We just want to do it in a healthy manner where people aren't feeling guilty afterwards. You have like 2 or 3 donuts, you're feeling sick to your stomach, you're feeling like heavy, you're not feeling great, you've got brain fog.
I don't know. I feel pretty good after I drive through Krispy Kremes,
Yeah, they'll call it a nice little ramp up, then there's the crash.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
true.
We're trying to educate people a little bit more about health and wellness. So for us, our distribution is a great play because we can reach more geographic space through our distributors, but we do plan on opening more tap rooms to bring people into the ambiance of what we are at Trident. So primarily we're storytellers. We love educating people on the craft aspect of coffee. We do it through a great way with all of our symbols for each one of our products. And then the product itself, the quality of it stands apart. We pretty much switched over to all organic here recently too. So we're really making sure we're diving into the health and wellness and people are getting a great quality product and they get to enjoy it without feeling guilty about it.
You got 2 locations. Is this something that you envision that you might franchise in the future, or that discussion kind of crossed your mind? Or
we've been entertaining different models for growing the taproom presence. If franchise is one that always comes up, just because we've seen franchise models work very well for certain spots. And so it's one piece of the puzzle, but we're coming up with different angles, different models to how to effectively do that. Just so that if we have a good enough reach, we can franchise it, fantastic. But if we can keep it internal, especially for the first like 10 or 15, it will allow us to make sure we have the quality control pieces down, we have our SOPs down, we have basically, the franchise book that you want to pass off to somebody.
right.
It's all dialed in, ready to go. So we're gonna make it as the option to franchise if we want to, but we're just gonna make sure that we have all the processes down, so it's just very repeatable, very scalable.
Really cool stuff. How do folks get in touch with Trident Coffee Roasters? How do I order it? How do I buy it?
Just straight to our website at the moment, tridentcoffee.com. We have roasted coffee, we have our cold brew, we have keto products, and we have apparel. And if you're in the Southern California area, we're in about 500 stores around Southern California. If you're ever in San Diego, we have 2 great locations, one in Coronado, one in Imperial Beach. So those are the spots you can reach out to us. And then we're most active on Instagram at the moment. But if you send any emails my way, we can get back to you too as well.
Okay, well, we're going to put the website and links to, as well as your Instagram handle, on the show notes. Here it is. We're out of time, Eric. Like I told you, it goes by quick. We've been listening to Eric Johnson. He is the Chief Executive Officer at Trident Coffee Roasters in San Diego. Eric, a Naval Academy grad and Navy veteran. Thank you for stepping into the spotlight. Very entertaining. I have learned a lot about cold brew coffee today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Hey, you've been listening to the Spotlight on the VeteranCrowd Network. We're bringing veterans to you that are making a difference in our community, and Eric Johnson is certainly one of them. Eric, I'm going to throw a Bravo Zulu out to you, and that's a wrap.
Thank you for listening to Spotlight by VeteranCrowd. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and uploads, please visit our website at VeteranCrowdNetwork.com. We'll see you next time.